weird to me. It's there. You should see in the top right corner that little red dot. If I start class and you don't see that red dot up there, tell me. I have a tendency to forget sometimes. So just keep an eye. And if you don't see the red dot, just say something and I will make sure to hit record. All right. So this is my website. All your information is going to be there. The syllabus is up there. The Hawks link is up there. All your assignments and everything else will be done on Hawks. Okay. So all the homework and everything else is done up through Hawks. Does everybody have a login for Hawks? Okay. If you have not, the syllabus is right there if you want to grab one. If you have not gotten the code for Hawks yet, that's fine. You can get it'll give you 2 weeks before you need to access the code. So if you're waiting for financial aid and stuff to come through and things like that, you're okay. You will not need a physical copy of the book. If you got one, there's no worries there, but you will not need it. It's all online. So if you just want to get the code for the class, that's fine. All right. All right, let's go through a little bit of stuff in the syllabus. We'll right there. All right. So here's all my information. Actually, the email address changed. I totally forgot to change that. That's my phone number. It goes right to my cell phone. It's a Google Voice number, so if you call it, you'll just leave a voicemail, but you can text it as well. If you have questions or need help, text me. I've been known to literally answer people when I'm sitting in concerts and at hockey games, so it doesn't make a difference. Worst case, I'll get back to you the next morning if I'm sleeping. So, but I have a tendency to respond pretty quickly, as long as it's something easily that I can answer quickly and not have to actually do a bunch of stuff. Most of the time during the day, I'm sitting at home working on a computer anyway because I'm writing math books now. So if you text me, I'm going to get back to you pretty quick. If you need help after class and stuff like that, I don't believe there might be a class in here after this one, but I'm not sure yet. If there's not, I'll actually be here for a little bit so I can stick around and help you out those things. I'm only here on Mondays and Wednesdays. I live up in Hartford, so I don't come down the other days. But if you want extra help outside of class time, I can easily set up a session online and do it through Google Meets or Zoom, whichever you're more comfortable with, and help you out that way as well. So I will be here on Mondays and Wednesdays at 8:30 in the morning, not necessarily in this class, but I can tell you where I'll be in the building, and you can always come in a little bit early if you want extra help there as well. So that's the book you'll need. Sure, that's the same one that was on the Three Rivers Bookstore site, so it should be the one you're getting there. We'll talk about Rugio later when I'm actually going to start using that. All right, what everybody's worried about, how you're going to be graded. Homework and Hawks is 20% of your grade. I will drop, I think it's the lowest 5 homework assignments. So there's a few of them that you can miss in there. It's basically 100 or nothing on the homework assignments. Once you hit mastery on it, you get 100 on it. So you don't necessarily need to get every single question right, as long as I think it's 80% on Hawks and you get mastery of the topic. You do that, you get 100 on the homework assignment. There will be 3 tests. They will be on October 2nd, October 30th, and December 4th will be the 3 tests. Chapters 1 through 4, 6 through 8, and 9 through 11. Those are on the syllabus there. Basically the week of the tests, I will review on that Monday class, and the Wednesday class will be the test. So we'll always do a review day before you have the test. Most likely, because we all have computers sitting in front of us, I will do the actual test through Hawks on the website. So you'll just log right in and do it there. The nice thing is you instantly get your grade back. And you can do out your work if there's anything you got wrong or things like that. And I can give partial credit. So you'll turn in your work afterwards, and I'll be able to give partial credit that way. But you'll be able to at least have your actual grades pretty much immediately after you finish the test. The final exam, I don't know the final exam schedule yet, but it'll be sometime between the 10th and the 16th. I'm kind of hoping it's on the Wednesday class and not the last day class, which is the 16th, but we'll see. That's 25% of your grade, because everybody's always going to worry about this. If you do better on your final than one of your tests, I would replace your final exam, your lowest test grade, with your final exam grade. So let's say you did horribly on your first test, you got a 65 on the first test, and you got an 80 on your final. That 65 becomes an 80. So I'll replace your lowest test grade with the grade that's on your final as long as it's higher. Okay? As long as you get a 90 or above on all your tests and you've completed the homework, you're exempt from the final exam. So you need a 90 or above on all 3 tests, not an average of a 90 on the 3 tests, a 90 or above on all 3 tests, and you've completed all the homework assignments. You're exempt from the final exam. Yes?
Do you still allow note cards for tests?
I do. All your tests, you are allowed a note card. So you'll get a 3x5, 4x6 index card. Use that to write down the formulas and stuff that you're going to need, any like little information, stuff like that. The review that I'm going to go over on that Monday before the test will be almost exactly the same as the test. So use that to create your index card, and then you can use that on the actual test. Participation, as long as you don't make me horribly mad, you get the 10 points. So that's my fudge factor grade in there. That's just basically, I put that there purely because I've had a couple people literally just show up for the tests and not do anything else, and they lose those points. Other than that, everybody gets the points. I'm not taking attendance, so as long as you regularly come, you're fine. The homework will be due the last day of class before the final, which will be on December 4th. So the homework is set up in Hawks where it's due before the tests are due. So like the chapter 1 through 4 will be due before that test. I will not go through and mark those grades. Let me rephrase this. I will update the final grade at the end of the semester. So if you don't finish all the homework before the test, that's fine. You can still go back and do it. You'll get full credit for it. Okay? So I will put your grades into Blackboard. I put 1 grade in for the assignments. That grade will be there updated the last day of the semester. So if you finish homework later, that's not a problem. So don't freak out. It's like, oh, I need extra time. Even if Hawk says it's late, it's not a problem. The grade still counts. That make sense? Okay. Just trying to go through all the questions that I end up normally getting asked halfway through the semester. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
What days are the exams tests?
They'll be on Wednesdays.
Is there any on
Flip on the back.
between November 20th and November 28th?
No. Actually, if I remember, you will not have class the week of Thanksgiving. So we wouldn't have class that Wednesday anyway because the school's closed at that point. And I cancel the Monday class, so I give you that week of Thanksgiving off.
Right.
So, because I know people go away and things like that. So, all right. Any other questions? Awesome. How many of you are forced to be here because you have to take statistics and don't really like math? Okay, about half and half. That works. I cannot guarantee you're going to love math at the end of the class. I hope at the end of the class that you find a usefulness of math. Let's put it that way. Okay. I never say I can guarantee you're going to love math. That just doesn't happen all the time. But statistics, out of all the classes, unlike like a traditional algebra class and those things, statistics is actually used by you all the time. Right? You're rarely ever going to use the quadratic formula and things like that you learned in algebra class. It'd be nice if you did, but probably not. However, our world is run by data now. Everything you do in life, anything that's being done or thought of and everything else is being done by data today. So, and statistics is the study of that data. So understanding how this works gives you a better understanding on how decisions are made that could affect you, which is very important. How many of you have a smartphone on you? How many sensors are on that smartphone? A bunch. And it is constantly collecting data. Unless your phone is in airplane mode, which I highly doubt any of yours are, your GPS is on. That GPS is constantly collecting data about where your locations are. Your Wi-Fi is on, your cell signal's on. That is also collecting information about where you are. There's barometers on it that check out air pressure and things like that. That can tell you about how high you are in buildings. Okay, so with all the data that's being collected on that phone alone, That's not even including the actual microphone, the camera, and everything else that hopefully isn't running, but nobody really knows. The data being collected on you is numerous. That's how most companies nowadays are targeting you with ads, because they know about where you are. All right, you'll be driving down the street, and all of a sudden, you'll see a pop up on your thing. And it's like, oh, 7-Eleven's got this new sale. It's like because you just drove by a 7-Eleven and it knew it. All right, so the amount of data that's being collected by these sensors and everything else that we're carrying around with us is more data than was created in the world up until like up until probably about 2000. Okay, it's insane the amount of data that's being collected, and they're using it. Every time you log into TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and any other app, they're collecting data on you. Those cookies that everybody always hears about, those little things, the little pieces of code that are put in that are then attached, and that collects information that then sends back to those. So if you've ever said, you know, I really could go for a burrito today, and then all of a sudden you see Facebook ads for Chipotle and Taco Bell and things like that, it's because it knows that information. It's collecting that data. Even if you don't realize it, it's collecting it. I was on a cruise last week, and we saw the Queen Elizabeth, and we wanted to find out. Now I'm getting ads from Cunard, which is the company that owns the Queen Elizabeth. It's all there. Okay. The reason these software programs are free, the reason you don't pay for Google, you don't pay for Facebook, you don't pay for TikTok and those things, is because of that data. That data is more valuable to them than you paying for their service. Okay. So the joke on Facebook for a while was Facebook was going to start charging you. And I'm like, yes, please. Everybody's like, no, please charge me. I would rather pay them $10 a month and eliminate all the data that they're collecting on me than give them all the data. Okay? Because those advertisers are paying a lot more than $10 a month for my data. Right? So that's what I'm trying to explain. That's when we're going to start looking at how people use this data and use this information. All right. What do you know about statistics? Yeah.
Vital to economics.
It is vital to economics. What are some points in economics that use statistics?
I mean, it's everything. It's the buying and selling of resources. It's where they go. It's the allocation. It's monitoring and tracking everything.
So a lot of the stuff that they use now to actually, I think it started in the late 90s. It was called JIT, or just in time. So the reason that we all survived COVID, we all made it through 2020, even though they closed us all down and shut everything down. Why do you think toilet paper and everything else ran out?
Because there was a rush on it.
There was a rush on it, and they didn't have a ton of stuff in stock because most businesses nowadays use a just-in-time kind of or system to get stuff there. They know about how much they sell on a regular basis of all these items. And instead of having them all stored in their warehouse, there's a truck that comes a day before they're going to run out. So when they had that massive rush on toilet paper and everybody stocked up on toilet paper, which to this day, I still do not understand, stocked up on that, they weren't prepared for that. So they didn't have any way to get that stuff to them quickly enough to maintain the rush. So it ran out. Same thing with a lot of other items during that time. And that's what also caused that whole supply chain breakdown, is because everybody follows that all the way back up. Amazon doesn't store every single item in stock. They get it to you pretty quick because they know when these items are going to start to go on, be bought. And they start to stack up just before people are going to start buying the stuff. Okay, so that's the big thing right now in business and in economics, is that just-in-time model. And it's all based on data. All right, what's another place we use statistics? Yeah.
Wall Street.
Yep, Wall Street does. Wall Street does, it's not totally statistics-based, but it does use a lot of statistics. It's more monetary policy and stuff like that. thinking about stocks. Anybody know how stock price is done? And not the economics major. Stock price is based on the last person that bought that stock. So hold on, let's see what Amazon's at right now. Amazon right now is at $175.59. Let's say the economics major back there owned Amazon stock, and I convinced him to sell it to me for $10. And I bought it for $10 and the trade went through. Amazon stock would report at $10. It would instantly drop to $10. Okay? Because that's what that price is. There's not some magic number that people makes up. Oh, this is what it is. This is what it should be. It's literally whatever the last person that bought that stock was. That's actually how that whole Wall Street bets movement and Reddit and everything else worked. Is they pumped up the stock to get people to buy it, and then they dropped the price, and it plummeted. It's like they were literally manipulating the stocks based on people buying it and selling. All right, what's another place that uses statistics? Yes.
So like a sports team, you can go to like a college team stage and they have like both like minutes played and like shots taken, so you can feel like how good like specific players or teams are.
Yep. Sports uses a ton of statistics now. Sports analytics is huge. The one sport that does the most data is baseball. Because baseball plays so many games that the statistics, the normalization curve comes into play. One of the things that we're going to look at, you ever heard of the bell curve? The wonderful bell curve? We're going to talk a bunch about the bell curve. But the more data that you have, the closer to normalized it is, closer to that bell curve it goes. And since baseball plays 162 games a year, that really falls into play. Where in like football, where you only have 17 games, or I don't know how many games soccer normally plays in a season. Yeah, it's pretty low. You can go on runs where like you just have a really good set of games because there's not a lot of them. You can have those runs where it breaks the statistics. Like this seems odd, but that can happen. Hockey, basketball typically have like 70, 80 game seasons. It's a little harder to run the gamut the whole season. Okay. So, and in baseball, it's almost impossible to like have a massive season. Like the Yankees this year had an amazing first. They were doing really, really well, and then I think it was in was it May or June? They literally just like fell off the map and had like one of the worst records of baseball for a while. It was like, but that's okay because that's that normalization. It's like you're not going to have that run for an entire season in baseball. So tons of statistics in sports, and now with all the sensors and everything else that they put in place, they put sensors actually inside soccer balls, so you know how hard you kicked the ball and how fast it was and the curvature it was and everything else. So you can start to analyze. Well, my foot hit it at this angle and it curved this way. It's like you can start to look at like what angle do I need to have my foot at so it curves the correct way to go in, like that type of minute analysis that we actually currently have. Hockey, they have sensors on the actual uniforms of the players, the sticks, the puck, and everything else to be able to monitor heart rate, exertion, muscle tension, blood pressure, all this stuff. So they know when that player needs to come out to be able to maximize their performance over that specific amount of time. Okay. So sports, big data. All right. What's another one? What's happening in the world right now? What's the big news story that's going on all the time right now? The election. Politics is massive in data. And you're going to be inundated with it over the next few months. A lot of the things you're going to see tons of polling data and stuff like that come out. So every time those polls come out, it is information that they collected. So let's see what the latest poll is. So the latest poll for national as of September 2nd has Harris up by 2.7% nationwide. Do you think they asked every single person in the entire country? They would have to ask like almost 200 million people. So how do you think they got this poll? Okay. How many people did they ask?
It's not the government doing this, it's like independent news sources that are doing it.
Correct. So how many people do you think they asked across the entire country to find this information out?
200,000?
Okay, 200,000 is the first guess. Anybody else? There's zero wrong answers to this question. It's like literally just pick what you think is right. I'm going to show you in a second. That's the sample number. 1,386 people. This one had the most. This was 7,818 people. Quinnipiac, we all know Quinnipiac is in the state. 1,611 people. Okay. Yes.
Is that just like 2,000 random people from around the country that are on their newsletter or whatever?
Nope.
Or is that within a specific area?
No, so these are nationwide polls. So these have to be nationwide data. So one of the things that we're going to look at, not today, but in the next couple days, because this is really the beginning of this stuff, is how do they pick those numbers? How do they pick those people? So if somebody calls you from an unknown number, what do you do? Or you don't answer the phone at all, right? Okay. If you answer them and it's a poll, if somebody wants to ask you a bunch of questions, what do you do? Right. How do you think they get those 1,386 people? They call. They call you. That's how they get those 1,386 people. So what is the most underrepresented group in those 1,386 people? Millennials and Gen Z. You guys don't answer the phone for anything. Okay? The majority of the people that are actually answering these are the older people. Okay? So, if the older people are the ones answering these questions, and the older people are the ones that they're getting the data from, and they're using that data to inform decisions and policies, are the decisions and policies going to go the way that you want them to go? Nope. The only way for them to get that data is you to answer their questions. They're trying to figure out ways to engage the younger generations in these polls and to get that data. The problem is you can't just put up a poll online to get the data because it's not random. And to have good data, it needs to be randomized. Okay? You can have polls online and get data from that, but you have to take it with a grain of salt because the information that is being put there is people who are very passionate with that or people who are not very passionate about it, who literally want the exact opposite of whatever it is. They're the ones that are going to answer the polls they see online. The people in the middle, I don't have time to deal with that. They just scroll by. So they're trying, they're not being very successful. Okay. So right now, a couple thousand people are deciding what happens. Why does it matter? When you go to the actual election, it's you walk into the poll booth and you vote, right? Okay, so then everybody's votes are going to get counted, and that's going to be who ends up winning the election. So why do these polls matter?
They can give politicians an incentive. They can give them a little bit of foresight on this will work, this one. This is what most people want. This is not what most people want. And they don't have to wait 2 years to find that out.
Yeah.
I think it could persuade other people to go that direction and then make the percentage go up even more.
That's the other thing. When you're looking at this type of data and this type of information is being publicized, it sways people's opinions one way or the other. So, and it all depends on how your viewpoints are in it, but that's going to sway you. When they start to announce winners on election night, California hasn't even finished voting yet. That impacts people going out to vote California. If my candidate's winning and I'm sitting there on the 405 in Los Angeles, I'm waiting to get home, and it's like, do I really want to turn this way and go vote, spend another hour or so in line? Well, my guy's winning, so it doesn't matter. And I go home. That can change an election depending on how many electoral votes are needed at that point. So when they publicize things, that can make an impact on things and on people. So these polls, while they're not really looking at a ton of people, do sway opinions. Okay? So understanding that and looking at it is important. I don't know if they have, and nobody ever polls Connecticut. It's funny. We have Quinnipiac in our state, but they don't even ask Connecticut. Because Connecticut is no, and they don't look at it that way. All right, so I can't show you Connecticut's data. Anybody ever had their favorite TV show canceled? So, anybody ever hear of the Nielsen ratings? So the Nielsen ratings, it's not used, actually, it's still used today. But it's not the number one motivator now. It used to be. So it used to be that when everybody had cable and was watching TV like that, there was a box that was put in people's houses, and it monitored what you were watching. You'd have to tell it which channel you were watching, and it tracked that. They've sent out 500 of these boxes across the entire country. They were the ones that decided what everybody watched. That was it. Those 500 people. If they didn't like your show, it got canceled. Because according to them, nobody was watching the show. Okay? Now, with streaming and everything else, they have a lot more data on you to determine which shows are popular, which shows aren't. However, if you pirate your stuff and don't actually watch it on the streaming service because you don't want to feel like paying for it, that doesn't get counted. Okay? So they use that data that way as well. So data can impact that as well. Same thing with if like certain products and stuff that you like all of a sudden stop getting made. Same thing. They just weren't being sold. Then the nostalgia effect comes into play, and it's like people go, but I really liked it. It's like you didn't want it before, but now you want it? Yes, because it's gone. My favorite example of that is the Hartford Whalers. The Hartford Whalers are more popular today than they ever were when they were actually in Hartford. Like I lived in Hartford my whole life. Used to go to games. There was nobody in the crowd. Everywhere I go now, I see Whalers jerseys and Whalers hats and stuff like that. It's like, okay, they're gone. It's that nostalgia effect. We like things that we cannot have. Okay. So, and we got to, the marketers and stuff have to figure out how to manage that into a new product that they want to sell that has those little inklings of that nostalgia effect, but isn't that original product. All right. Anything else? Any other good uses of statistics? Your grades, how many classes we offer, all that's data. How many statistics classes are offered this semester? I think there's 3. There's not many. And this is actually one class that every single nursing program major now has to take So, they use the numbers, they use the data to figure that piece out. It's like, do we have enough students for this? When are they going to offer it? I think there's 2 during the day and there's 1 at night. And there's all the statistics classes that are being run this semester here. So there's not many. All right, let's start looking at some definitions, because we need actual words and stuff to be able to think about statistics. First 2 we're going to look at is population and frame. So population. Population is the total set of subjects or things we are interested in studying. So if we're looking at the polls for the presidential election, the population would be the population of the United States. All the people, or the the voting population of the United States. Okay, so those over the age of 18. If we're looking at how many students are going to take statistics and stuff like that at Three Rivers, the population would be students at Three Rivers. So that population can change, but it is important to know what population you're looking at. Okay? So you always need to state your population. Sometimes, not always, we can list all the members of the population. Obviously, you're not going to list every single member of the entire electoral or the voting population in the United States. It'd be way too many people. But if we're looking at a small enough sample or small enough population, we can list all the actual population that's listed there. And that'd be considered a frame. Telling you that just in case you actually see it on Hawks, we're not going to use that term very often. What happens every 10 years in the United States? Census. What's so important about the census? Did you guys all complete your census 4 years ago? Or your parents did when you were living there? Yes. Yeah, so we have statistics. You can look online right now and say, what's the population of the United States? And it'll give you a number. There you go. Approximately 333.3 million people in 2022. When was the census taken? No, it was 2020. It was done in 2020. Even with COVID, they had to do it in 2020. There's actually one of those things. One thing that's actually, it's written into the Constitution that it must be done every decennial. So it had to be done in 2020. Even if they didn't want to, they had to do it in 2020. They started it, they didn't finish it until 2021. And actually, they're still analyzing the data even to now. I think the final report came out last month. So the census is done every 4 years, or every 10 years, sorry. It's used to get a good idea of the population of the United States. The reason that's actually right in the Constitution is the number of representatives that you have is based on the census. So in Connecticut, we used to have 7 representatives. We're down to 5 because we didn't lose population. We lost population relative to other states. So other states grew more than we did. So we lost representation, which means for all intents and purposes, your vote counts less in the presidential election because you're voting for your electorate. It's not one person, one vote for the president. So that census is very important. The census also collects data on all demographic information. So age, sex, or gender, race, ethnicity, all that stuff is collected. So we can start monitoring how the population is changing over time. Just to let you know, all my notes are posted up on my website too. These exact same slides will be posted there. So you don't have to worry about taking pictures or copying everything down verbatim. You can easily do that afterwards if you want. And also most of these I'm literally just copying and pasting from the book. So, all right. So that census collects all that information. Every single person in the United States has to fill out the census. If you don't, they actually send somebody to your house to collect that data. They send people out into the communities to collect information from the homeless population, which is the most underrepresented in the census population because they move, right? They send people out looking at the migrant populations. Even the illegal immigrants are counted in the census, okay? Because they need that data to understand what's going on. So when they're going around and collecting the data, they actually have to collect the data. It's doesn't have your names and everything else on it. So it's anonymous style data, but it's attached to an address and a location. So this way they can collect that data and not have people worried about how that data is going to be being used. Because we want to know where our populations are. We want to know which financial brackets they're in. We want to know how the ethnicity is changing in the country. Okay, so that information is useful to figure out the policies and everything else that are going to be going on later down the line. Population parameters. So these are all those things that I just listed with the census. These are all those parameters that we'd be looking at. Okay. When you're doing a study, your population parameters will be specific to what your study would be. So here's some parameters for populations that we could look at based on the presidential election. So the number of eligible voters, percentage of voters who vote for specific candidates, percentage of men vote or women vote, percentage of the age groups that'll vote, the average income that favors it. They also look at education level on voting for it. So we have our pre-polls. And does anybody ever, so depending on how interested you are or not, the night of the election, they'll go through and they'll actually have like CNN and NBC and Fox and everything else will start calling states for certain candidates. So basically, as soon as Connecticut closes, they will call it for Harris. It'll be within minutes after Connecticut closes. Did they count any votes? No. So they can do this because they have people that stand outside of polling stations and ask questions to collect the data. And based on that information, they can determine who's going to win that state. If it's close, they don't have enough data, that's when they say it's too close to call. And they start waiting for information to come in from the actual votes to call it. Most of the time, the total votes aren't counted in a state. They could take up to a week or more to actually count every single vote. But you'll know the night of the election who won the election. So, and that's because they use statistics to do it and not just counting the votes. That can change. So back in 2000, way before some of you were born, so back in 2000, we had the whole situation in Florida with the hanging chads. And George Bush ended up winning Florida by, I think, just over 100 votes. Florida is a population of like 27 million people. So winning it by 100 votes is like next to nothing. And it took a month before they had that decided. Yes.
Wasn't it? Because the story that I'm always told is the fact that it was flipping between Gore and Bush until the Supreme Court stepped in and said, "Okay, no, it's Bush."
So it was flipping back and forth between them until the Supreme Court came in and said, "We're done counting them again." So because they kept counting them, and every time they counted them, they came up with a different number. So the Supreme Court stepped in and says, "We're done counting. You've certified your votes. That's the election." Because so there's specific dates in the actual Constitution of the states. Things have to be done by a certain time. And one of those dates, I believe, is December 7th or 10th, something right around there. That's when the states all have to have certified their election. It was getting close to that date to certify the election. And because Florida hadn't certified by that point yet, they sent it to the Supreme Court and said, you're done counting again. Because they had kept, basically, the candidates kept going back. Every time they were done counting, the other person would appeal it and say, count again. And then the other person would appeal it. So it's like, that's basically what ended up happening. So that date's important because when they certify it, that's when the electors that are voted on or that are picked have to cast their vote for president. Because again, you're not voting for the president. You're voting to tell a person to vote the way you want them to vote. So in Connecticut, we have 7 electorals. We have 5 for our representatives and 2 for our senators. That's how they pick them. So we have 7 electoral votes for Connecticut. And whoever wins Connecticut, those 7 people are supposed to vote to support that candidate. And then they send it to Congress, which then everybody knows about what happened last January 6th. On January 6th, Congress then certifies that vote and accepts the electoral votes as an accurate representation. And then at that point, the president has actually been elected. Before that point, the president's not elected. They're the president-elect at that point based on the election results. But at that point, they're certified. So there's a whole process behind it. That's what happened in 2000. And you might hear a whole thing about like spoiler effects and stuff like that. We'll actually talk about the 2000 election and how that was actually the only election that actually fell within the spoiler effect guidelines, where Ralph Nader probably did steal the election from Al Gore. No other election was close enough. They claimed 2016 was, but it wasn't close enough. Where a third party actually cost an election to one of the 2 major parties. All right. Now, we've talked about how we cannot ask every single person in the entire United States what their opinion is. So we have to get a sample. So a sample is a random set, or is a subset of the population that is used to represent the entire population. We don't really need that big. That sample can actually be collected anyway. Okay? Doesn't have to be random or anything else. However, if you want to actually get good data about it, it has to be a random sample. So for example, if I sat there and I asked, you guys would be a sample of the entire population of Three Rivers. If I asked you what your favorite ice cream was, and I asked you and we determined it was strawberry, can I say the entire population of Three Rivers prefers strawberry ice cream? No, because you guys are not a random sample. Okay, so you are a sample, but you are not a random sample, so you are not good data to be able to use that to infer what's happening in the larger population. Remember how we had the parameters for the population? A statistic is the pieces for a sample. So that's where statistics come from. Let's do... Just because I know I have a whole bunch of nursing people in here. Let's look at this question. All right. So read the question. All right. What's the population? What's the population? No, it does. Yes. Yes. Boys from infancy to 18. Okay. So your population is the entire group you're studying. We're studying boys from infancy to 18. So that's the population. What is the characteristic that they're measuring? The height. So that is the population parameter that we're measuring, is height. You identified the sample. The sample is those 1,000 boys that were randomly selected. Okay. So since they are randomly selected, we're going to be able to use that data to understand what's going on in the entire population. Okay. So is the purpose of the data to perform descriptive or inferential statistics? We haven't talked about either of these yet. Why? Okay, one little note about me. You're going to hear the question why a lot, even if you're right. So do never assume when I ask you why that you're wrong. Okay, I will ask you why if you're right. I will ask you why if you're wrong, because I just want to know why. Yes. That wouldn't be why it's inferential.
I'm trying, I know what I'm trying to say, but I can't say it.
I know. I was like, you got it right, but wrong reason why. We'll figure it out in a second. Yes.
Data. It's like numbers, it's just numbers and facts.
Okay, so raw data actually is descriptive. Okay, so I'll give you the wonderful definitions of the two. So descriptive statistics is the raw data. It's just the collection, organization, and the actual just showing you that information. Okay, so that is your descriptive statistics. What is the root word of inferential? Infer. So inferential statistics is to make a reasonable guess about a population characteristic using sample data. Okay, so we've collected the data for those 100 people or those 100 boys, and we got their heights. If we're just going to display that heights and say this is the height of those 100 or those 1,000 boys that we studied, that's descriptive. Okay, the nurse in this situation was trying to figure out what's happening in the population. Okay. She was interested in the growth curve of the boys from infancy to 18 in the population. So by collecting the data on that 1,000, she is then going to use that data to infer what is happening in the general population. Okay. So you were right there. All right, so that's that difference. So if you're using data to infer something, it's inferential. And if you're using the data to describe what you found, that's descriptive. Okay. Yes?
So in layman's terms, how our election works is we're using inferential statistics, unless we count every single
So,
ballot that would be.
I'm going to have to figure out a solution to that problem. That's bugging me. So the polling data and everything else, and what you're going to see reported on TV, is inferential. The actual election would be descriptive because they are actually counting all the votes. Okay. In every election except for president, it is one vote, one vote, one count. So when you're voting for your senators and representatives, your mayor, everything else like that, there is no in between to how they count the votes. So whoever wins the popular vote in those situations wins that election. The presidential election, the Supreme Court, or not the Supreme Court, the Constitution instituted what's known as the Electoral College that said there was a specific number. You're voting for an elector, which is then picking that person. There was a variety of reasons they originally did this, but that's what they put in place. The problem that when it was originally done, every elector basically represented around 30,000 people. So as the population of the United States increased, the number of electors increased. In, I think it was 1912, early 1900s. I believe it was 1912, but I could be off on the date. The Congress passed a law stating that they were maxing the number of people in the House of Representatives to 435 people. So at this point right now, we have 435 people in the Senate, in the House, and 100 in the Senate. So we have 535 votes in the Electoral College, which is why you need 270 to win. Okay. If they did not cap the House of Representatives at 435 people, we could have a couple thousand people in the House of Representatives right now, based on population, which means we'd have a couple thousand electoral votes. And it would be closer to representing the population of each state than it is currently. So the problem isn't with the Electoral College. The problem is with they capped the House of Representatives at 435 people. So that's that disconnect between the Electoral College and stuff. But the polling data, that's inferential because that's inferring what's going to happen. And what's going to happen on the night of the election is inferred because they're using some data to be able to determine who wins. When the state certifies the vote, now it is descriptive. We have that actual data, and we're looking at the entire population, not a sample of that population. Does that make sense? So we are going to talk about these two types of statistics a lot. So those are two extremely important pieces of information. All right. So the last thing we're going to look at first class is a lot of talking because it's just going over a bunch of different little things. We'll actually get into more math soon, don't worry. And you're like, darn, I actually rather the talking. The math and statistics is different. So it's not going to be, so I actually should state that. If you're one that really liked algebra, statistics is probably going to be a little harder for you than algebra. If you're one that really didn't do well in algebra, you probably will do okay in statistics. Okay, because it's not a lot of we're going to do some formulas, but we're going to use calculators to do most of them. So it's not a lot of that information. It's really being able to look at what the problem is and pulling that stuff out to be able to do the calculations. That's the more important part in statistics. All right. I make this claim. A lot of people make this claim. In math in general, there's one answer, right? Your math teachers have always told you there's one correct answer. 2 + 2 is always 4. It's never 5. Okay, there's one correct answer, except in statistics. Statistics is the only math you can lie with. Okay? And that is due to a lot of, because you're inferring things, you're making that leap from sample to what you're believing the whole thing is. How you do that and your personal biases can affect what you have inferred. So while the data isn't wrong, the steps you take with that data, you can use to lie with, basically. So when you're looking at studies, and some of you might have been old enough to in 2020 and actually were really paying attention, and some of you probably weren't, really didn't care. When 2020 with the coronavirus and everything else came out, there was a lot of studies and data and everything else trying to figure out what was going on. and trying to figure out if the vaccines were good, and if masks were helping, if social distance, like all these things. They were trying to figure this stuff all out while it was happening. Okay. So because it was happening at the time they were trying to do this, things got missed, things got rushed, and a lot of things were stated. And then like a week or two later, the opposite was stated. And that confused a lot of people. And if you weren't understanding what was going on behind the scenes, you could think that, well, they're lying to us or they're always wrong. Why should we believe them? And you now see where we are today with that type of situation. So understanding where the data comes from is very important. Understanding the biases of that person and the organization that's looking at it is also very important. Everybody has bias. Even if you don't believe you do, you do. And when you're looking at it, understanding that is very important. The next thing is how was that data collected? How many people did they look at? We were looking at those polls, right? It was like a couple thousand people. Most of them were under a couple thousand people that they were looking at. Are they accurate? Believe it or not, they were. You only need about 2,000 people in the entire United States to actually determine what happens in the United States. We're going to figure out statistically why that's true later on. But did they do a large enough study to be able to determine this information? So we were talking about samples and we were saying how they have to be randomized. So when we were looking at the vaccine data, the first sets of vaccines. So when you're going to do a medical study and you need volunteers for that study, depending on what you're testing, the person has to be willing to take it. Okay? So these were new vaccines that nobody had ever taken. And they didn't have data on what side effects or anything else would be. Okay? So what type of people would volunteer to take the vaccine at the initial point? Yeah.
The worst off.
Yep, sometimes the worst off. Sometimes some people that just completely and utterly believed it and wanted to do their best to help. Okay? They did the studies. They found that the vaccines were like 95% effective in stopping coronavirus. When it really went out to the entire population, it was only about 70% successful. Were they wrong with the 95%? No. The people that they studied, they had a flawed group. Back in 2020 when it was all happening, the people that were more likely to get that shot at the very beginning before anything happened were also the same people that were always social distancing, the same people that were wearing their masks everywhere they go, the same people that were doing all these other things to protect themselves from coronavirus. So they're doing all this stuff to protect themselves. The vaccine was helping, absolutely was, but it was everything else they were doing was also helping. So when you rolled it out to the mass population, where everybody wasn't necessarily doing all those things, or once they got the shot, they stopped doing those things because they figured they were protected, that's why the number went down. So that's where how the data is collected, how the information is measured and everything else is very, very important to look at that information and understand why there's discrepancies sometimes in it. Couple other things, pictures are worth 1,000 words. We're going to look at graphs and looking at those. Were they drawn correctly and appropriately? That can make a difference. We can use graphs to influence people, and we can use graphs that the data is completely correct, but they're drawn in a misleading way to influence opinion. Okay. Do the claims make sense? Should there be other interpretation or other information we need? And have multiple people looked at it? Most of your studies that you're going to see, or most of the studies that come out, have been looked at by multiple people or have been run by multiple people. So the first polling data that I threw up, there was like 14 different or 13 polls that did that data. Okay, so they average those 13 polls. So there's 13 different groups that looked at it. And if they're all saying basically the same thing, you're probably right. Okay. If there's variety in there, maybe we need to go back and start looking at some of that data again. And that's why things go to scientific journals and are peer reviewed and all the other stuff that goes into effect to make sure that that is accurate. So these are the things right here that if you don't understand what statistics are and how the numbers, what the numbers mean and what the information they're giving you is, these are the things that can run into problems. And this is what we see a lot today is that people don't understand the actual underlying data. They just listen to a soundbite or a meme or a little video online that tells them something and they believe it because they don't have the time or the information to really dig in to figure out if that's correct or not. Okay. Does that make sense? All right. If you have not signed into Hawks already, make sure to sign into Hawks and get that set up. The first couple assignments are already up there. They actually all should be there. So I will be posting the review tests for chapters 1 through 4 probably in a week or so where we start getting closer to the actual test date. So you can actually practice that online as well. But do start going through the homework. Make sure you set up on Hawks. If you have a question with it or anything else, let me know. If you do not have your codes, you can use Hawks for 2 weeks without it. So if you don't have your codes yet, sign up for it, start working on it, and then get your code. If there's any problems with anything else like that, just let me know. And I will see you on Monday.